Hi, I'm Richard Morris from Canberra, Australia. In 2014, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. After taking the dietary advice of the Australian Diabetes Association, I became more diabetic.
Ouch!
Ouch. So I did some research which led me to the ketogenic diet. Spoiler alert, I reversed my type 2 diabetes by drastically reducing my carb intake and increasing my consumption of healthy fats. In 2016, I was determined to help my buddy Carl by showing him what I did and the science behind it.
Hey, y'all, that's me. I'm Carl Franklin from the U.S. I also used to be a type 2 diabetic, but not as severely as Richard. I devoured all the information Richard sent me, and after a mutual friend went keto to address prostate cancer, which, by the way, he's still cancer-free.
Nice.
I also went on the ketogenic diet, and that was February of 2016. By April, I was in full swing reversing my diabetes.
We're not doctors and we don't give medical advice. We're just a couple of dudes on the internet who actually reverse their diabetes by following a ketogenic diet.
Right. And we just want to share our experience and what we know about the science behind the ketogenic diet.
Yeah, so we started this podcast to chronicle Carl's journey and also to provide some solid information to those curious about this lifestyle.
Right. And now we have over 200 podcast episodes, this being 211. Mm-hmm. Some of these have been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. And also, after failing on Facebook, we moved our online community to the ketogenic forums, where tens of thousands of people share their experiences every day.
We also founded an annual ketogenic festival called Keto Fest. Carl and I are both software developers. As such, we found ourselves at software conferences several times a year, and we tend to gravitate towards the conversations that happen in the hallways at conferences. Sure, the talks are great, but it's the community that we enjoy the most.
So Keto Fest is a conference to discuss the latest research of ketogenic diets, and it's also a festival celebrating the ketogenic lifestyle.
So tell me, Carl, what is a ketogenic diet?
It's a diet where instead of burning sugar and starch for energy, our cells preferentially burn fat. That produces molecules called ketones that our bodies use for fuel.
Right. Our primary molecular fuels are glucose, which we make from carbohydrates, and fatty acids, which we make from fat. Our cells have two modes. In one, they burn glucose and make fat, and in the other, they burn fatty acids and make ketones.
But you don't have to eat a high-fat diet to be ketogenic, right?
When you're starting out, you may have to, and then in a few weeks as you become better adapted to burning fat for energy, when all your calories come from fatty acids, the amount that you need to eat becomes coupled to satiety, which integrates not only the variable amount of energy your body needs to run every day, but also the amount of fat that can be drawn down from storage.
So how many carbohydrates do we need to restrict ourselves to in order to get into that state?
That depends. Some of us who are metabolically disordered need to get below 20 grams a day, and somebody who's quite metabolically flexible can probably eat as much as 100 grams a day.
So how about other nutrients like protein, minerals, and essential cofactors like vitamins and essential fats?
You need from 1 to 1.5 grams of protein for every kilogram of lean mass that you have, and beyond that you just waste excess by turning into energy instead of using fatty acids. As for the other essential nutrients, if you're eating fatty meats or eggs plus leafy green vegetables, you'll get most of those, because the organisms that made those foods have already concentrated a lot of the essential cofactors.
Ketogenic diets are varied and delicious. They can be vegetarian or carnivore, home-cooked or takeout, hot cuisine.
Hot cuisine!
Or just bacon and eggs.
Eggs.
Excellent.
There's a little bit of foreshadowing for you there, kiddos. As long as your carbohydrates are low enough. That's the whole point.
Right. And if you're an absolute beginner, check out our Starting Keto podcast for more information at start.2keto.com. So, we're going to try something new. We've been doing this podcast for over 4 years now and spoken to a lot of subject matter experts about all kinds of nuances on ketogenic diets, from eating carnivore all the way to eating vegetarian and even eating nothing.
Right, but the essence of the diet is simply reducing carbohydrates, however you do it, so that your liver takes over control of your blood glucose based on what you need, rather than your pancreas controlling blood glucose based on what you eat.
Right. We've tried to keep these episodes translatable for real people, by adding recipes into them so that people can see the kind of foods that we eat, that anyone can make, that are delicious and nutritious and satiating.
Yeah, we've decided to add some special episodes to change up the translatability of our content by doing some deep vertical dives into just one food. No mail, no recipes, no malarkey.
I think you mean bullshit.
I'm not supposed to use that word.
Yeah, but I can.
Yeah. This first episode, we're going to do an entire episode on the humble egg. Why you should consider eggs in your diet, how to cook them, and why eggs are one of the most potent keto foods for your health budget.
I think if we're going to do a deep dive on eggs, we're going to need Richard's research, my experience keeping keto cheap and translatable, and most importantly, Carrie's experience as a professional chef.
I think what you mean to say, Cousin Carl, is Keto Dudes Assemble.
Yes!
Yay!
We're back.
We are back, and we're going to talk about eggs. I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about eggs as a nutritious food. And where I get most of my information on nutrient content of foods is the USDA Food Data Central. And I'm going to put a link into the show notes for both the USDA data sheet on egg whites and also the data sheet on egg yolks and the data sheet on eggs as a whole. Now, the important thing about this resource is you can actually look at it and it will tell you all of the nutrients inside any particular food. So that it's got a search facility. You can say, look, I want to know what are the nutrients in baby corn, for example, or whatever. And it will tell you not only how much water is there, how much energy is there, how much protein, fat, and carbohydrates in that food, what fiber content it is. But if you choose the right option, you can actually get to drill in to all of the sugars involved, not just how many carbohydrates they are, but whether they're glucose or fructose or lactose or maltose. You can also see all of the minerals and essential cofactors like vitamins and fatty acids, and drill into exactly which amino acids are in the food product. So it's a really useful resource if you're wanting to find out what the nutrient values of a food are. And the interesting thing about eggs is they really are complete in almost every essential nutrient that a human body needs. And the reason for this is that essentially they're everything that you need to be able to grow a baby chicken. So they have all of the necessary contents for making chicken cells. And chicken cells are not that dissimilar from human cells. So probably the only nutrient that humans need that eggs don't contain is vitamin C. And the reason for that is that humans, in fact primates, are kind of unique that we don't make vitamin C. Most animals are able to make vitamin C from glucose. But primates and there's a couple of bats, specifically fruit-eating bats, and the guinea pigs are the only animals that don't make vitamin C. And the reason for that is that...
When you say fruit-eating bats, are you talking about my mother?
Or my mother. Technically they're called frugivorous bats. So if you want to, if you want to use her full name, essentially, the reason for this is about 50 million years ago, our ancestors lived in trees on fruit, and vitamin C, or the pathway that makes vitamin C, only makes vitamin C. It's not like it makes vitamin C and 5 other things, and therefore it's really important to keep it around because it makes all these things. If your ancestors lived on fruit in an environment where fruit was plentiful and always available, it's easy to see why evolution might say, well, you don't need this particular enzyme for making vitamin C.
Right.
And that's why humans have to get it from their diet. We don't make it. But essentially, this USDA database is useful because you can actually compare foods. So, for example, you might say, okay, what is the difference between an egg yolk and an egg white? Now, you know that eggs contain protein. They contain all 9 essential amino acids that we can't make, plus plenty of the other 11 that we can make. In fact, here's an interesting question. Of the two, the yolk or the white, which do you think contains the most protein?
I'm going to say the white.
Okay. Why do you say the white?
It's just what I've been told. You know, I've been told that the protein is in the egg whites, and the yolk is cholesterol, fat, and that kind of stuff.
And a lot of people on high protein diets, they eat the whites, right? They eat
do.
only egg whites, and they get rid of the yolks. What do you reckon, Carrie?
No, it's the yolk.
It is the yolk. Yeah,
really.
It's like 15% of the yolk is protein, and 10% of the white is protein. The white is actually just water, and salts and protein. So it's essentially, it's like the primordial sea that the animal was swimming in. It's like a resource. The animal is in the yolk. The yolk will grow into the animal, and you know, we all evolved out of the sea, and so this is the primordial sea that the animal lives in and gets.
Slap my face and call me Susan.
Okay,
I
Susan,
had
you
no
got it.
idea.
Cousin Susan doesn't have the same ring.
It really doesn't, does it?
So eggs also contain a lot of fatty acids. I mean, they're roughly 3.1% saturated fats, 3.6% monounsaturated, 2% polyunsaturated fats, and that's roughly the fat content of our own cells. And it makes a lot of sense because here are all of the raw ingredients for building chicken cells, which, as I mentioned, are very similar to human cells. So to make a baby chicken with functioning cells, you also need all the essential cofactors, like you need cholesterol and lipids like phosphatidylcholine to make cell membranes, and you need magnesium, potassium, calcium, and sodium salts to build electrolyte gradients. And you need zinc, copper, iron, selenium, and manganese to coordinate proteins like hemoglobin. You need cofactors like thiamine, riboflavin, pantothenic acid, folate, cobalamin. These are all for metabolic reactions, and we generally call these as B vitamins as a group.
Yeah.
You need vitamin A, retinol and beta carotene, which is required for vision, growth, and immune function. You need specialized carotenoids like lycopene, lutein, which are essential water-soluble molecules for modulating oxidation. And then you also need vitamin E, alpha tocopherol, which is an important lipid-soluble molecule for modulating oxidation. So another essential ingredient is choline, which, you know, of all of the foods, I mean, choline is absolutely an essential source of methyl groups for metabolic reactions, but it's also necessary to make neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, membrane lipids like phosphatidylcholine, and it's concentrated most of all of the foods that we eat. It's most concentrated in either eggs or liver, and as you know, I don't eat the evil liver, so for me, eggs are a very important nutrient. Wow. So essentially, they're a really good nutrient for getting a lot of the essential factors for building your human cells. So I highly recommend eggs as a nutrient.
And it turns out that Mr. Egg is our guest today. As we said. 3
keto dudes and an egg.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm interested to hear from Carrie about how eggs perform in recipes and what roles they take on. I mean, you can cook eggs and you can make omelets, of course, but how does a chef use eggs as an ingredient and for what purpose?
So apart from the magical nutritional properties which Richard has so brilliantly laid out for us, if you're not already convinced that you need to eat eggs, the other magical thing about eggs is that they are probably the most versatile and useful ingredient in any kitchen, but especially a ketogenic kitchen. You can... as just an egg, you can fry them, you can scramble them, you can soft boil them, hard boil them, you can poach them, you can bake them, or you can whip them into an omelette. And I'm going to share my super simple omelette the way I do it in a minute.
Salad. Sorry, but I went all Forrest Gump on you there. I'm sorry.
I was expecting a Hobbit, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But they also do magical things when combined with other ingredients. So some of the main properties that eggs have from a cooking perspective are eggs are great emulsifiers.
Oh, yeah.
So
what does that mean?
So an emulsifier is something that causes oil and water to be able to live together happily. So oil and water don't mix. If you introduce an emulsifier, the emulsifier literally sits in between the oil and the water and hangs on to both of them.
So is that why mayonnaise requires eggs in order?
That's exactly why mayonnaise requires an egg. Well, specifically, it mostly requires the egg yolk.
Yes.
One of the differences from a cooking perspective between the egg yolk and the egg white is that the egg yolk is full of a substance called lecithin, which is an emulsifier. So the lecithin gets in there with your oil and whatever water-based ingredients you have in your mayonnaise, like your apple cider vinegar or your lemon juice, and it literally holds the oil in one hand and the water in the other, and it holds them together in what we call an emulsion.
It says,
so
I want to hold your
smooth
hand.
You want to hold my hand, Cousin
I
Carl?
want to hold your hand.
Yeah, I actually work with the lecithin every day in the lab because all of our cell membranes have they're basically the membranes made out of molecules that have an oily side and a water-soluble side. And that phosphatidylcholine that I spoke about before is actually lecithin. I think famous chef Raymond Blanc, who was a 3 Michelin-starred chef in France, tried to see how much mayonnaise he could make with one egg yolk, and he made roughly 44 gallons of mayonnaise from one egg yolk. So you need very little if you stretch. This guy is an expert, but if you really stretch
He's
it
an
out.
expert.
He's a 3 Michelin-starred expert.
Wow.
So one of the magical things about eggs is their ability, particularly the yolk, because of the lecithin, is their ability to emulsify things. Like they're the peacemakers in the kitchen. They hold all the bits together. One of the other things that eggs is particularly useful for is that eggs aerate. And actually the white is the aerator in the scheme of things. The white has a lot of different proteins in which together enable you to whip it into a structure which will then actually set once heat is applied. So this is how you get meringues and this is how you get cakes that are leavened, raised with eggs.
Or a souffle.
Or cloud bread.
However, if you're making, depending on the recipe, depending on what you're making, so if you're whipping egg whites, just egg whites on their own, the one thing, if you're struggling with this or if you're new in the kitchen, you may not know this, but you will not be able to whip an egg white if there is any trace of fat in there.
Yes, I knew that.
So whipping is a function of the proteins in the egg white. If you introduce the tiniest bit of fat, the fat actually gets in between all the proteins and it prevents them from linking up to make that strong structure, i.e. the whipped aerated thing. So if you've tried whipping eggs and you just haven't been able to make it work, the reason is probably that when you separated your eggs, you had a speck of egg yolk in there, or your bowl and your whisk were not pristine. So
you touched it with your fingers that have oil on them.
Or you touched it with your fingers. So your bowl, your utensils have to be pristinely clean so that there's zero fat. And when you're separating your eggs from your whites, if you break the yolk, put it in the fridge and start again, because if there's any fat in there, your egg whites will not whip.
Kelly, my wife, has a great tip for when you're separating eggs. Do them one at a time in a cup. And then when you're sure that there's no shell or there's no yolk in the white or whatever, then you add your whatever it is that to the big bowl. Exactly.
And that the other great thing about doing that, which is something that I do too, is because especially if you're making a large batch of anything, if you crack the eggs straight into your mixture and one of them happens to be bad, because you can't always tell if an egg's good before you crack it.
You'll really know when it's bad once you crack it.
You're only going to waste that one egg. You're not going to have to start all over with your whole mix. So there's two reasons why cracking eggs one by one into a cup is a really great idea.
Have either of you ever cracked open an egg and it had a beak? In other words, a little chicken?
No.
I haven't either.
That's a delicacy in some places.
I haven't either, but I've heard that it happens.
I have cracked open 2 eggs in a row that both were double yolkers.
Ooh. Did you play the lottery?
Yeah. I didn't. I probably should have.
So emulsify, eggs, they aerate.
Aerate. Okay. Eggs also make, technical term, fantastic glue.
Binders,
so you'll often see them included in something like a meatloaf.
Mm-hmm.
The egg holds everything together by virtue of the proteins in it,
right,
but it doesn't weigh it down. So eggs can often be used if you have a mixture that is crumblier than you want it to be. Adding egg can be a great way to rescue it or to give it some more structure to stop it falling apart.
And you would add both the white and the yolk, right?
Yeah,
you can. They as we know now, yolk has more protein. But I typically, if I use egg as glue, I use the whole egg and whip it up, just whisk it up to break it all up. So it's a what am I trying to say? What's the word, Richard?
A gluey mess. A bound solid. So yeah.
And then I use the whole egg as a binder.
Okay.
That's what I normally do. The other thing that eggs do is they have the ability to thicken.
Right. Like a custard.
But you have to heat them. Mm-hmm. It's not just adding an egg won't thicken anything. Right. It's the act of adding the egg and then heating it, which is one of the other pain points for a lot of people with eggs, is that if you heat them too high and or for too long, your egg will start to weep. So,
poor egg.
It was a good egg.
Weep, i.e. release the water.
Okay.
So you you have to be careful with, for example, an egg custard. It has to be a low heat. You don't have to do it for too long, and you have to stir it all the time. If you don't do that, you're going to get lumps, and nobody likes lumpy custard.
Right.
Nobody.
So when I make anglaise as a base for ice cream, and I know you guys do that as well, you combine the cream and the egg yolks in a double boiler, which is just a pot of boiling water and then a bowl on top of that. So then you constantly stirring, and I get it up to 165, which is what the federales say has to be in order to kill the bacteria. Which, hold that thought, we'll get to that in a minute. But
the other method you may use is to what they call temper the eggs. If you've ever been looking at a recipe and it says tempering the eggs, what that normally means is that you heat your liquid ingredients. In the case of ice cream, your milk and cream, you heat and sweetener normally together, you heat that. And then you have your egg yolks whisked up in a separate bowl, and then you slowly pour half a cup or a cup of the hot cream mixture into your egg yolks while you're whisking. So that allows you to incorporate the heat into the eggs in a way that the eggs won't suddenly thicken and become lumpy and horrible.
So why would you temper like that rather than just start everything off cold in a double boiler and continue to whisk and bring everything up to temp at the same time?
Either way.
Yeah.
It's just personal preference. Really.
Interesting.
Tempering was just the way I was always taught to do it. Maybe it's a cultural thing.
Could be.
But either way works. So thickening is something that eggs are very, very good at.
Yeah.
Because of the amount of proteins between the yolk and the white, but also the number of different proteins that are in there makes an excellent thickener. They also add, which is something that maybe people don't think about, is flavor. Eggs have a flavor, and if you've ever had a duck egg, you'll know that and quail eggs, they do taste a bit different to each other. So eggs also have their own magic flavor, and sometimes you'll find that people say eggy. They'll use eggy to kind of denote that flavor. So eggs also have that.
Yeah.
And the other magical thing about eggs is that they pretty much go with everything. Sweet things, savory things,
right.
Eggs go with it all.
I have a question for you, Carrie. Everybody has their own favorite way and method for making a perfect soft-boiled egg.
Yes.
How do you do it?
Okay, so soft-boiled eggs, foolproof soft-boiled eggs.
Yeah.
A lidded pan or a pot small enough that the eggs will be fully submerged when you add them to the water. You bring the water to a boil over a high heat. You add the eggs, you cover the pan, and you turn the heat off. Or if you've got a cooktop that stays hot, remove the pan from the heat. And then you cook the eggs according to these times, depending on how hard and soft you like the white and the yolk. You would leave it to cook for 1 to 3 minutes if you want the outer white set just enough to allow the egg to retain its shape when carefully peeled. So if you like a very kind of loose, soft-boiled egg, 1 to 3 minutes, leave that in the pan. 4 minutes, you're going to get a soft-boiled egg that is opaque almost all the way through. The yolk is barely warm and completely raw. 5 minutes, you're going to get a white that is opaque but still quivering.
Oh.
And barely set towards the egg yolk, which is warm but still raw. 6 minutes, you're going to get opaque, firm all the way through. Yolk is warm and just starting to firm up around the edges.
That's how I
And
like
if you
it.
leave it,
Yes.
that's Richard. Richard's
That's
a 6
me.
minute
That's
soft boil.
I'm a 6 minute soft boil.
Yeah.
and 7 minutes, you're going to get it's fully cooked and hard. The white is as hard as a hard-boiled egg, but the yolk is liquid in the center and just beginning to set around the edges. So boil your water, put the eggs in, cover the pan, remove it from the heat, and then time it and take them out of the water. Richard's going to take them out at 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Because he's a 6 minute soft boil. What are you, Cousin Carl?
Well, I've been, and I know Richard does this too, a little bit obsessed with the Sous Vide method, which means under vacuum. And it's a technique where you, if you haven't been paying attention to Two Keto Dudes, I'll just explain it real quick. You take whatever food you're going to cook and you take all the air out of a plastic wrap or a container or some sort of silicone thing, basically, so it's vacuum sealed. And it can be seasoned, whatever it is, if it's meat, whatever. Turns out eggs come in their own little vacuum sealed package called the shell.
You don't need to seal them under vacuum at all.
Yeah. And I'm going to link to the Serious Eats.
Oh, yeah. That's the go-to site.
Yeah. And the Serious Eats website has this whole page dedicated to time and temperature of eggs in a sous vide bath. And they show you what it looks like at this temperature for this many minutes or hours or whatever. And so they landed on a single recipe for soft boiled eggs in sous vide. And here it is. You adjust the sous vide cooker to 143 degrees Fahrenheit.
So that's almost 61.5 Celsius.
Alternatively, you could fill a large beer cooler with hot water and use a kettle of boiling water to adjust the heat to 146. So you also want to prepare
143.
Yes, but this says 146.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's if you want to fill the beer cooler with hot water. You want to bring it to 146 because once you add the egg, it's going to chill down a little bit.
It'll start getting cool, yeah.
Yeah. So you prepare an ice bath, which is just ice in water in a big bowl. You bring a large pot of water to boil over high heat. Gently lower the eggs into the water using a metal spider or a fine mesh strainer. Cook for exactly 3 minutes. Then immediately transfer the eggs to the ice bath and let chill for 1 minute. You transfer to the sous vide cooker, and then you cook that for 45 minutes. So what you're doing is you're first boiling the outside, right, for 3 minutes. Shock it in ice bath, and then put it in the sous vide bath for 45 minutes and let it cook from the inside out. And apparently that makes a perfect soft-boiled egg. Takes a little bit longer than Carrie's method, though.
Now, I just put it in at 63 degrees Celsius for an hour.
That'll work.
And that kind of works for me. The interesting thing about temperature and cooking is you're applying heat to the outside of a food, and the inside of the food is at room temperature or fridge temperature or whatever it is.
Right.
And it takes time for that heat to propagate through. And so that's the first thing, is that you're cooking the outside first, and then it's slowly getting warmer and warmer in the inside. And the other interesting thing is that egg yolks and egg whites set at different temperatures.
Right.
So egg whites set at 55 Celsius and egg yolks set at 60 Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing here is that anywhere between 55 and 60, you're going to have just one part of it is being set. So, it's definitely, personally, I don't like runny whites.
I don't either.
But I really like a runny yellow. It's a runny yolk. It's like a sauce, especially over like a burger with a cooking egg in a ring with just just a sunny side up. And then you just slice into that egg and the yolk goes over the burger. I mean, that's some nice sauce.
So, I have a story about my experience growing up eating eggs in Connecticut. All my life until I was in my 40s, I think. I was in my 40s. I was eating local eggs, and, brown eggs are local eggs and local eggs are fresh. That's what they say in the ads, right? So we always had brown eggs. I have since learned from Alton Brown that there's really no difference. It's just the color of the shell. But the yolks in the eggs that we always bought at the supermarket were always really pale yellow. Right. And I thought that's what eggs are. And then I went to Europe and I had breakfast at a hotel.
And they were orange.
And they're orange and dark orange. And I was like, oh.
And how did they taste?
Fantastic. Yeah, they just tasted fantastic. I've since learned that the reason that the yolks are orange is because of the diet of the chickens. They actually feed them flowers that have that color, and that makes the yolks that color.
So that's carotenoids like lycopene and beta carotene and the like. But the other reason that egg yolks that are yellow in pasture-raised eggs and not in coop-raised eggs is because in large egg-laying factories, the chicken are fed corn and maize and grains essentially.
Right.
Whereas in pasture-raised animals, chickens
bugs.
Are not vegetarians. They eat bugs. They eat a lot of bugs. And one of the things in Europe, I know they feed crustacean shells and small crustaceans too small for the market to chickens.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons you can get omega-3 enhanced eggs in some places because they've been fed crustacea like small baby prawns and prawn shells and stuff like that. So that's another reason why they can pick up those carotenoids from the diet. But yeah, it's an omega-3 egg is in Australia is much more orange than your regular egg and much more tasty, I find.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe, or if you find it hard to believe that what the chicken eats changes the egg, I cannot eat backyard chicken eggs.
Really?
I react to backyard chicken eggs. I do not react to supermarket eggs.
Ah, interesting.
So it has to be something in the feed that the backyard chickens get, something that they're eating is actually causing the reaction, not the egg.
Yeah, chickens are little dinosaurs, so they eat other chickens. They eat bugs, any bug that comes nearby. They'll eat seed if they have to, but it's not their preferred
But
feed.
it does make a difference. Like you are eating what the chicken ate when you eat an egg.
Yes,
and so if you can get, my body's weird. I can't eat backyard eggs because I react to something, but that's just me. But for people who don't, then if you can get backyard chicken eggs, pasture-raised eggs, then do that because it does make a difference.
They taste so much better. Hey,
as well as the taste, but yes, nutritionally, it does make a difference.
Hey, do you refrigerate your eggs, Richard?
I don't. No,
you just leave them out.
My eggs.
Most of the world doesn't refrigerate eggs, but the U.S. does, and in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, parts of Scandinavia, most of the time when you purchase eggs in the grocery store, they're refrigerated. But in a lot of places in Europe, for example, they don't refrigerate them. So why is
the shelf?
that?
Yeah, they're shelf stable.
So I grew up in England and then I moved here, and I admit that I just thought Americans were like clean, freaky, oh my goodness, it's an egg, it has to be in the fridge. Americans tend to be a lot more germophobic than the Brits.
That's what you thought anyway.
And so, so when I came here and everyone's got their eggs in the fridge, and I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Like, stop it. I've never put an egg in the fridge in my life, which was true up to that point. Yeah. And then I discovered what Mr. Franklin is about to share with you.
Yeah. So it turns out that in America, eggs are refrigerated because the USDA requires eggs sold for consumption to be washed, processed, and then refrigerated before they come anywhere near a store's shelves. But most European and Asian countries have reached the opposite conclusion, requiring that table eggs not be wet washed and also not refrigerated. So it's something to do with what's on the shell of the egg, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a barrier. There's a barrier on the egg that stops them from being porous that you can wash off. And so what happens is when you wash an egg, you lose that barrier, and now it can take in things. It becomes porous, and so it can take in bacteria from the outside world. So in Australia, if you have eggs that have feathers on or a little bit of poo, that's actually a good thing. It means they haven't been washed. Don't eat that bit. You don't eat the shell.
No. Yeah, right. Don't eat the shell
and the flavor and the texture.
And you can, if you have an unwashed egg, you might even be able to. You should probably wash it off before you crack it.
Yeah, exactly. You can certainly do that. I've become expert in the process of cracking eggs. So I can crack them one-handed.
So in America, then, if you buy backyard eggs which are not washed, you do not have to refrigerate them.
You do not have to refrigerate them. You should still
only have to refrigerate them if they're store-bought eggs.
Right.
And you should, eggs are generally pasteurized when they're washed, and so there's less chance of things like salmonella. So in a backyard egg, you've got a better chance of salmonella happening. The way pasteurization works is that you warm a food up to a certain temperature, and it's going to be specific to the pathogens that can live in that kind of food over a certain amount of time. And you can, so eggs, for example, if you warm an egg to 55 degrees, it's still going to be liquid, but it only needs to be in for nine minutes or something or so. But if you cook it to 64 Celsius, then it can be fully pasteurized after 2.5 minutes.
And it's about 165 Fahrenheit, right?
Yeah. And compared to 140-ish. So essentially, the longer that you cook it, the less the temperature has to be. And ideally for eggs, you don't want to cook the egg. You want to just keep it below the point where the proteins will set.
Right. And
so you want to keep it for like 15 minutes at below 50 Celsius, and that will pasteurize salmonella. And what they're doing is the longer it's at a particular temperature, the more salmonella dies off.
Right.
And you're trying to reduce by 10 to the 6. So you're trying to reduce by 1 million the number of salmonella bacteria that are on that egg. Well, if you have an egg that's got 2 million salmonella bacteria on it, it's a really dirty egg. Pasteurization still probably doesn't it'll reduce by half the amount of pathogens on it. So you still need to have good processes for handling eggs, and you still need to crack them individually, just because, you'll know when an egg is off. You'll get that hydrogen sulfide smell.
Oh, yeah.
Rotten egg gas is no joke, people. So that's why you really, even if you get your eggs that have been washed and pasteurized and are supposed to be, totally perfect, you should still crack them individually, because, you might get one.
And you can always blame it on the dog.
Right.
Or the cat.
Yeah.
Or the cat. So that's actually what that eggy flavor that Carrie was talking about before was, that there's hydrogen sulfide in present in very small doses in eggs anyway. It's only when that overproduces that you end up with a real rotten egg smell.
All right. So I know Carrie has a recipe she's going to share here, but I just want to give a shout out to my friend Julie Fox McClure in Vermont, our friend, and who taught me a foolproof way to make mayonnaise. And I tried making mayonnaise many times. I remember, Richard, when you were here, we tried it and we couldn't get it to work for some reason. But the foolproof method that she taught me uses a stick blender and 3/4 cup of avocado oil. I don't like using olive oil because it's too strong a flavor. Avocado oil is a good fat.
Especially virgin olive oil. Yeah. Regular olive oil's less sort of piquant. So,
so 3/4 cup of that, 1 egg, a little splash of apple cider vinegar, maybe a tablespoon, maybe another tablespoon of Dijon mustard, a pinch of salt, and I put a little allulose in my mayonnaise because I like just a little hint of sweetness.
You like a Kewpie style mayonnaise?
Yeah. And then just put the stick blender all the way down into the container, turn it on, and slowly pull it up to the top. By the time you get to the top, it's mayonnaise.
Yeah.
And it takes 5 seconds. So you can make mayonnaise faster than you can cook a burger.
Yeah.
That's really the truth.
And that's just an egg yolk. You don't use the white in your mayonnaise.
I do. I put the white in. It's just the way that she taught me, but you're right. You don't need to put the white in. And I've been ever since. I have a squeeze bottle of mayonnaise in my fridge at all times that I make. I haven't eaten mayonnaise out of, from the store in probably a year and a half.
Well, they use things like gellins to set mayonnaises to make
and
them
also
shelf-stable.
Soybean oil and nasty stuff.
Oh, yeah, nasty oils, cheap oils. Yeah,
Yep.
cheap oils and carrageenan and other gellins that will help the emulsion to stay. But, a lot of those have carbohydrates in them. So
she also gave me the tip that if you see like too much sheen on top, you can just add a couple drops of water.
Okay.
And put that in and
re-emulsify, yeah.
And also,
nice.
To Richard's point with the French chef that he talked about, you can, if you want to just bulk it up and add more, just drizzle more oil in. And you can make more mayonnaise. You don't have to add more eggs.
You can make 44 gallons of
44 gallons of oil he used.
On that one magical egg.
Yep.
In the first 6 months that I was keto, my go-to breakfast every day. So after 6 months, I stopped eating breakfast because I just realized, if I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat. But, for the first 6 months while I was getting the handle on eating, and I wanted to have one go-to meal, but I didn't want it to be boring.
Right.
So what I would do every morning is have a royal omelette, which is an omelette made with eggs, a little bit of cream. And then I put, a bit of ham in, a bit of avocado, a bit of cheese, fold it over, and I would eat an omelette every morning, for the first 6 months of going keto. And then I was full for until dinner pretty much. And then I would eat whatever keto meal I would eat for dinner. And that was the easiest way for me to get into keto. So I would say to anybody who's type 2 diabetic and has heard that this diet is useful for reversing type 2 diabetes, learn how to make an omelette because it really is, an easy meal to make.
And by the way, that was the first recipe you ever shared on Two Keto Dudes.
I think it was, actually.
And you called it
was the first keto meal I ever made.
And you called it your nom omelet or nom omelet or something.
nom omelet.
I'm with you, Richard. Omelettes, any time of day, 2 minutes to make. You can put anything you have in the fridge in it. They're absolutely the fastest, easiest, tastiest, like whatever you've got meal. They're my go-to meal. If I want something hot and I, don't want to take more than 2 minutes, an omelette is plus cheap, depending on what else you put in it, obviously, but cheap. Just a cheese omelette for me is just like, some herbs, some dried herbs. Eggs, omelettes are so versatile. I could live on omelettes and just change the fillings out and the herbs and the type of cheese. I've made some fabulous omelettes just by varying the herbs and the cheese. It's still a cheese omelette, but just, make it with sage derby instead of cheddar, and it's a completely different animal.
Everybody in the United States just said, sage what? This is the thing that you'll notice if you ever go to England is that they have 1,000 kinds of cheese, and they complain when they come to the United States. I remember Stephen Fry.
None of it's orange.
Yeah, Stephen Fry wrote about this famously. He's like, "Where's all the cheese?"
So sage derby, and Carl, you've had sage derby,
delicious.
Right? Sage derby is fabulous. It's a white, firm cheese that's kind of infused with
sage. Kind of cheddarish.
Yeah. And it comes from Derby, which is a county. Well, Derbyshire is a county in England. So, but you can get. And actually, I want to say they have sage derby at Trader Joe's. And if you go to most grocery stores now, don't go to the cheese section. Go to the deli, the magical weird cheese section. You'll find sage derby, and it's one of my favorite cheeses. And it will transform your omelette into something completely different. So I'm with you, Richard. I'm a huge fan of omelettes.
That's how you have the same meal every day, but have something different every day.
Yep.
Yeah, never get bored.
Swap out the cheese.
No.
And by the way, if you're anywhere near Old Saybrook, Connecticut, go to the cheese shop called Fromage.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Which I remember when Carrie didn't know about this, and it's sort of close to where she lives. So I told her I'd meet her there, and I got tied up, and so
he was late. He stood me up,
and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be a few minutes." She goes, "No problem. I'm in heaven."
They also, it's not just cheese though. They do have all the little
the gourmet things,
all little white porcelain dishes and all these other
fancy Dijon ketchups.
Yes. And all this imported European food, which just, I mean, I don't eat that any of it anymore because it's all, high carb, but just to see the labels, it just kind of, I was like a kid at Christmas.
Yep.
And then Carl arrived.
Yeah, and I ruined it all. So let's give the floor to Carrie for her recipe, including eggs.
Okay, so next to omelets, my favorite thing to do with eggs is to make these little, well, you don't have to make individual ones. You can make it in a casserole dish. But what I call egg cups, which if you make them in muffin cups, it just makes them easy to portion. The reason I love these next best to omelets is because you can eat them hot, you can eat them cold, you can make a big batch and then eat them over a week. They're completely portable. You can take them for lunch. You can have them on the go. So, and you can pretty much put anything you like in these things. And as I say, you can either make them in individual portion sizes in silicone cups, or you can pour them into a dish and then just slice it up. So these, I wanted to share this because the flavor combination of this is fabulous, but it's not something you might have thought about putting together in an egg. You can, though, pretty much put any combination of things that you have in your fridge or favorite flavors into this. And so again, there's like an infinite number of varieties of this. So you will never get bored if you have egg cups in your fridge or freezer. You can freeze them too. So these are my second favorite way to eat eggs. So you're going to start with 12 muffin cups, either in a muffin tin or the individual silicone molds, which I love because they just come out super easy. So you're going to spray those with coconut oil or avocado oil just to make the releasing of them easy. You are then going to get a little bit of avocado or coconut oil in a pan, and you're going to saute 6 ounces or 170 grams of finely sliced leeks. Leeks, if you don't know, leeks are, I think leeks are the finest vegetable on earth. And a lot of people have never tried leeks. I highly recommend you try leeks. Leeks are fabulous. Yep. So you're going to get your finely sliced leeks and you're going to saute them along with 6 ounces or 170 grams of ham, which you have sliced or chopped, depending on whether you've got the deli ham or the square ham, whatever. You're going to saute those together over a low heat until the leeks are soft. That's going to take about 10 minutes. Then you're going to divide your leek and ham mixture evenly between your 12 muffin cups, or just spread it in the bottom of a casserole dish if you're just making a big one. Then you're going to get 4 ounces or 110 grams of feta cheese, and you're going to cut it into small cubes. Now, you can buy pre-crumbled feta from the store, but you should be aware that it typically has a bunch of starch added to it to stop all the pieces from sticking together. So I highly recommend that you buy a block and you just cut it yourself. It'll take a minute, but you're not having all that kind of onboard starch that comes with the pre-crumbled variety. So you're going to chop your feta cheese or crumble it into small cubes. You're going to divide that feta evenly over top of the ham and leeks that you've already got in your cups. And then in a large jug, you're going to whisk 9 eggs, 2 tablespoons of heavy cream, a tablespoon of finely chopped fresh rosemary, and a sprinkling of ground black pepper to your taste. Then you're going to, when that's completely, beat the living daylights out of it, when it's mixed, you're going to pour the egg mixture equally into your muffin cups or your casserole over top of your vegetables, meat, and cheese. And then you're going to bake it in the center of the oven at 375 Fahrenheit, which is 190 C, for 30 minutes until they are well risen and golden brown. And that's it. And if you have it in the big container, it's going to take longer to cook just because a large contiguous mass is going to cook slower than 12 little individual things which have heat all around them. But it's very, very hard to ruin an egg cup. Like, even 5-10 minutes, go by the color.
Right.
It's you can guess on the time if you've got it in a casserole dish. Just as I say, go by the color, golden brown, then it's done.
If it's black, it's been in there too long.
If it's black, it's been there too long. But what you can, and what I like to do is if it looks ready, get a skewer and poke it in the center. And if it comes out clean,
dry,
then it's perfect. You can just pull it out of the oven. And as I say, you can eat them hot, you can eat them cold, you can freeze them, airtight container in the fridge. They're just so versatile. So I want to encourage you to try that flavor combination because it's super yummy. But you can vary the herbs and the cheese and the other ingredients, the proteins, to pretty much any of your favorite flavor combinations or whatever you have in the fridge.
Let's think about the benefits. Cheap. Easy to cook ahead of time, and accessible. Just pull one out of the fridge and nosh.
You could throw that in kids' lunch boxes.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a nutritious meal for a kid who's avoiding sugar and starch.
Yep,
that sounds like a wonderful meal.
Wonderful. And I need to take 1 minute at the end of the show here just to rant. And first of all, I'm not going to rant at you guys.
Is this going to be a malarkey?
No, it's not. Well, actually, yes, it is.
Okay.
But what I love about talking to you guys is you will never say something stupid like, when you caramelize the meat. Right? So, brown food tastes good. And I'm watching Food Network, and they're always saying, Robert Irvine will say, like, when you brown the steak, it brings out the natural sugars in the meat. No, it doesn't, you idiot.
The Maillard reaction.
It's the Maillard reaction. Everything brown is not caramelized.
Yes.
Okay, I'm done.
Nice malarkey.
That's serious malarkey. Yeah.
Do you know what, Cousin Carl? In all the time I've known you, I think that's the angriest I've ever heard you sound.
Normally, I'm the angry one.
Yeah, right? It's malarkey.
I've tried for years to get you to be angry, and I have failed miserably, and all I needed to say was caramelized steak.
Yeah, caramelize the eggs. Guys, I can't tell you how much fun this has been for us. This is great. Let's do this again real soon.
Well, we're going to hopefully do more of these deep dives into ingredients. So I think we could definitely do one on lamb. We could do one on beef, one on pork.
Yeah.
One on cheese.
Leeks.
Nuts.
Can we do one on leeks?
Alums. Yes. Let's deep dive into all of the alums.
Yes.
I love going to the grocery store and taking a leak. And because
you have to pay for it,
nuts.
Carl.
We definitely have to do an episode on nuts.
Speaking of taking a leak.
3 keto dudes and more nuts.
All right. Well, okay. Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, we hope you get as much out of this information as we do in putting it together.
The 2 keto dudes, we don't take advertising revenue. We have no benefactors with hidden agendas.
Yep, we're not in the pocket of Big Egg.
Right.
It's listeners like you who keep our lights on.
But there are a few ways that you can support us, all of which are listed on our website at 2ketodudes.com/support.
Yep. Thanks again, everyone.
And we'll see you next time on 2 Keto Dudes. Say, Carrie.
See ya.